as well as sort of lapses and just all out, forms of bias in the Western media that have come out after these series of attacks. And I just kind of want to compare them to things that the U.S. has done. So, I mean, you see this coverage absolutely everywhere. I'm just starting here with CNN. Obviously, they've got a lot of stuff down here talking about, and this is sort of the narrative of the day. Russia's carrying out airstrikes, but they weren't against who they said they were going to be against. I mean, one of the things that I want to point out here is, of course, this coverage comes with a nice little video. We didn't see that many videos of U.S. Coalition airstrikes. We didn't see that many videos of the aftermath of what happened with U.S. taxpayer dollars funding groups like ISIS. We didn't see the aftermath of refugees and civilians who have been killed over the past several years due to U.S. involvement. But of course, we got a nice video here when the Russians get involved. Just one of the first sort of pieces of hypocrisy I wanted to point out here. So if you cross the whole grand scheme of American media, you're going to notice this coverage was pretty universal throughout. If I move on to the Washington Post here, one of the things that I find interesting is that on the one hand, here you have once again talking about Putin didn't bomb the guys he said he was going to. The U.S. government only gets an hour of notice when Russia makes an attack. Again, how much notice did Russia get when America was going to go ahead and train operatives to commit attacks within Syria? How many other nations got notice? How many nations get notice when the U.S. does anything? The U.S. is operating in over 100 countries across the globe. How many of them gave permission for the United States to operate there? The hypocrisy is quite obvious at this point, I would say, guys. It's pretty much a joke. One of the things that I want to point out is that I'm not here to defend Russia in any way. What I'm simply trying to do is point out the discrepancies in the media coverage. Now, one of the things that concerns me, of course, is again on the Washington Post, the next thing you see is what is the United States going to do about it? Well, they want to step up their game. They want to launch even more airstrikes. They want to spend even more money. So here we have the Obama administration, your Nobel Peace Prize winning president, whose response to apparently, Russia doing too much in Syria, his response is no. We're going to launch even more airstrikes. We're going to drop even more bombs. We're going to spend even more taxpayer dollars, and we're going to kill even more civilians just to show you guys who the biggest, baddest motherfucker on the face of the earth really is. So every time that you guys want to go ahead and praise Obama, talk about him being a Nobel Peace Prize winning president, talk about him trying to end the wars, just remember moments like this, guys, when his administration made Bush look like the fucking Pope. And actually, our Pope now is kind of a dick, so maybe that's a bad comparison, but at the end of the day, guys, this is what an American war machine looks like, so don't be duped by presidents who say that they're going to end the Middle East wars within 6 months of being elected and then respond to Russian airstrikes by saying, well, we can make even bigger airstrikes because that's what Obama has decided to do. Moving on to the New York Times, the sort of chief cook and bottle washer for the liberals out there. Once again, we have some anti-Russian propaganda. Interesting that we have these different pictures that come out. And what I see here is such a similarity between photos like this that come from Russian airstrikes and photos that I kind of had to dig up of what happened after, Western-backed airstrikes. There's always nice visuals to go along when we're talking about, people in the East, China, Russia. There's always nice photos and videos to try to illustrate a point and to, sensationalize the stories to make Americans more sympathetic to their own government. But we don't see those photos when the civilians are killed by American planes. And we don't see those photos when the civilians are killed by Israeli bombs. And we don't see those photos when Saudi Arabia kills its own citizens. In fact, it's interesting that Saudi Arabia hasn't had their own Arab Spring event yet. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that they're allied with the U.S. and Israel. But nobody's really going to talk about that because we're all fixated on Russia, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, because both of our talking points are being decided for us. Speaking of Republicans, here's the Wall Street Journal, basically the exact same article as the New York Times article, just sort of some different wording, but the same exact point. Here we are, we've got this picture of Sergei Lavrov, we've got John Kerry looking so concerned, and, again, talking about the Russian airstrikes. They didn't launch the airstrikes at who they said they were going to. We've got Ash Carter talking a bunch of shit down here. This quote really made me irate, guys. Ash Carter talking about what the Russians are doing as pouring gasoline on the fire. Mr. Carter, was it not pouring gasoline on the fire when U.S. forces went in and trained and funded and armed and made possible the entire ISIS uprising? Was it not pouring fire on Iraq when you invaded that country under bullshit pretenses? Was it not pouring fire on the situation when you went into Afghanistan, a country which we still have not left years over a decade ago? And was it not pouring gasoline on the fire when the U.S. decided to have troops stationed in over 100 countries at the exact same time in response to an event that pretty much everyone knows it helped coordinate? Apparently not, but when Russia tries to bomb actual terrorists, I guess they're pouring gasoline on the fire. That's interesting. Anyway, of course, we have Reuters here, another sort of Western media outlet, kind of in disguise type of thing. Reuters was one of the first media outlets to jump on the bandwagon of the West here, and of course the usual, just a bunch of crap, guys. We've got our, secret sources giving us this information about civilians being killed, and I'm sure civilians are killed by these Russian attacks, but I'm really just getting tired of every single time you read a Western newspaper, it's always some anonymous source or some, they had a Skype interview with somebody who was saying that the Russians had killed a bunch of civilians. I mean, they just make anything up that they want. And again, I'm not saying that those things haven't necessarily happened in this case, but what I am pointing out is where was that coverage when the exact same thing happened as a result of America, Israel, Saudi Arabia, etc. These civilian deaths never seem to get reported when it's those countries. And again, here, as you can see, the only reason I left this up is because the Wall Street Journal, it has these topics, you can see across the screen here. We've got right here, we're talking about Syria. Down here, we're talking about Afghanistan. Pretty much every single newspaper, if you go to like New York Times again, this is on the front page of anywhere you would care to name. This is the topic of the day, guys. And I mean, I actually tried to go to several sources just to see if anybody wasn't talking about this. But as we can see, ISIS, Russia, Syria, it's the front page of the day, without a doubt. Kind of wanted to give a shout out to Zero Hedge at the end here, just because I feel that their article on the front page today really kind of gets into the heart of the matter. And I like the fact that they have sort of gone out there to say, hey, we're not backing Russia, much like what I have said, but the hypocrisy here is ridiculous, and you can just see some of the headlines they're examining. So if you want to read another point of view sort of similar to mine that elaborates on this, I might suggest going to Zero Hedge this morning and reading their article, Washington Blasts Putin for Russian Airstrikes on CIA-backed rebels in Syria, and just do some of your own digging, guys. And what I really want you to do is try to, if you can, do a comparison of how these events are covered when it's Russia committing the exact same crimes as America. Try to do a comparison of how the events are covered and try to see through the propaganda and just understand that the government is trying to make up your mind for you. You are being led down the wrong rabbit hole, and what you need to be doing is deciding on these events for yourself. Stop looking at it with a left-right perspective, stop looking at it with a west-east perspective, and just kind of realize that when our government does the same thing, and even 10 times worse, the wording is always that we're doing something heroic, that we're saving people, that we are liberating countries, that we are instilling democracy. And when Russia is bombing terrorists, they are, I guess you would say, not coordinating with the West. They're stepping out of line. They're supporting terrorism. They're upholding evil regimes. I mean, this is the propaganda, guys, and I just wanted to help point it out for you. So feel free to throw any comments in you want, and we'll talk soon.